In the autumn of 1431, as golden leaves drifted across the cobblestones of Sighisora, a child was born who would become legend and nightmare in equal measure. The infant's cries echoed through the stone halls of his father's fortress, but these were not ordinary times, and this was no ordinary child. His name was Vlad, son of Vlad Dracula, member of the Order of the Dragon, defender of Christendom against the Ottoman tide. The world into which young Vlad drew his first breath was one of constant warfare, where borders shifted like sand and allegiances changed with the seasons. Wallachia, his father's principality, sat precariously between the expanding Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary, a buffer state whose rulers survived not through strength alone, but through cunning, compromise, and an intimate understanding of when to bend and when to break. When Vlad was 11 years old, his father made a decision that would echo through the centuries. To secure his throne and protect his realm, Dracula agreed to send his two youngest sons, Vlad and Radu, to the Ottoman court as hostages, living guarantees of his loyalty to Sultan Murad II. Picture, if you will, the moment of departure. A crisp morning in 1442, mist rising from the Carpathian foothills as two young boys were loaded into a carriage that would carry them away from everything they had ever known. While his brother Radu adapted to court life with natural grace, learning to charm his captors and eventually converting to Islam, Vlad remained stubbornly, defiantly himself. He learned Turkish and Arabic, studied military tactics and statecraft, but he never bent. In 1448, news reached the Ottoman court that shattered young Vlad's world. His father had been assassinated by Hungarian-backed boyars who had grown tired of his delicate balancing act between Christian and Muslim powers. Worse still, his eldest son and heir, Mircea, had been captured, tortured, and buried alive by the same conspirators. The Sultan, recognizing opportunity in tragedy, released 17-year-old Vlad with Ottoman support to reclaim his father's throne. But they had fundamentally misunderstood what they had created. The boy who returned to Wallachia was no longer the child who had been taken away. His first reign lasted only 2 months. The boyars who had murdered his father and brother had no intention of accepting an Ottoman-backed pretender. They drove him from the throne, and he fled into exile, a landless prince with nothing but his name and his burning desire for revenge. When Vlad finally returned to claim his throne in 1456, he came not as a supplicant but as a conqueror. His supporters opened the gates of Targoviste, the capital, and he entered the city like an avenging angel. The Easter Sunday massacre of 1459 announced to the world that a new kind of ruler had emerged in Wallachia. Vlad had invited the boyar families to a grand feast in celebration of the holy day. The great hall was decorated with spring flowers and golden crosses, tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats and fine wines. As the feast reached its height, Vlad rose to address his guests. His voice was calm and measured, almost gentle. He asked a simple question: how many princes had ruled Wallachia in their lifetimes? Then he asked another question, one that froze the blood in their veins. Which among them could tell him who had killed his father and brother? The silence that followed was absolute. Armed guards emerged from behind tapestries and pillars, surrounding the assembled nobility. The oldest among them, those most culpable in his family's destruction, were dragged away to be impaled on stakes that had been prepared in advance. The forest of stakes that sprouted around Targoviste became Vlad's signature, his calling card to any who would challenge his authority. Foreign ambassadors arriving at his court had to ride for miles through groves of impaled bodies in various stages of decay. The common people surprisingly loved him for it. For generations they had suffered under the arbitrary rule of competing boyars. Under Vlad's iron fist, such abuses ceased entirely. The prince made no distinction between high and low when dispensing his harsh justice. The tale of the Ottoman ambassadors became one of the most famous. When Sultan Mehmed II sent envoys demanding tribute, they arrived wearing turbans, as was their custom. When they refused to remove these head coverings in his presence, claiming it was against their religion, Vlad ordered that the turbans be nailed to their heads. This defiance sparked the conflict that would define Vlad's legacy. Sultan Mehmed, the conqueror of Constantinople, turned his attention to this upstart prince who dared challenge Ottoman authority. The night attack of June 1462 remains one of the most audacious military operations in European history. As darkness fell on June 17th, Vlad led a hand-picked force of cavalry in a lightning raid directly into the heart of the Ottoman camp. They struck like ghosts, materializing from the darkness to sow chaos and death before vanishing again into the night. Most critically, Vlad himself led a desperate charge directly toward the Sultan's own pavilion, hoping to end the war with a single stroke. The assassination attempt failed by mere yards. Mehmed had moved his quarters at the last moment, and Vlad's sword found only empty silk where the Sultan's throat should have been. But the psychological impact was devastating. When the Ottoman army advanced toward Targovista, they discovered something that would haunt their dreams for generations. The forest of the Impaled stretched for miles around the abandoned capital, a grotesque monument to Vlad's defiance. At the very center of this macabre display, on the highest stake of all, hung the body of Hamza Pasha, one of the Sultan's most trusted commanders. His corpse wore cloth of gold and a turban studded with precious gems, a mockery of Ottoman grandeur slowly decomposing under the Wallachian sun. The effect on Ottoman morale was catastrophic. Seasoned warriors, veterans of dozens of campaigns, fell to their knees and wept at the sight. Even Sultan Mehmed, the conqueror of Constantinople, reportedly turned his horse away from the sight, declaring that he could not conquer the land of such a devil. But Vlad's resources were not infinite. By late 1462, he found himself in an impossible position. In desperation, he turned to Hungary, appealing to King Matthias Corvinus for support against their common Ottoman enemy. It was a fateful decision that would lead to his downfall. When Vlad arrived at the Hungarian court seeking aid, he was immediately arrested on charges of treason. For the next 12 years, Vlad languished in Hungarian prisons, a caged dragon forgotten by the world that had once trembled at his name. During these prison years, stories of his cruelty began to spread throughout Europe, carried by merchants and diplomats. German printing presses churned out pamphlets describing his atrocities in lurid detail. His name became synonymous with cruelty. In 1474, circumstances finally aligned to offer Vlad a chance at redemption. Corvinus agreed to release Vlad and support his return to power. The man who emerged from Hungarian captivity was both the same and utterly transformed. His third and final reign began in 1476 with characteristic brutality, but there was a desperation to this violence that had not been present before. The end came swiftly, and with a kind of poetic justice. In December 1476, barely 2 months into his final reign, Vlad was leading a small force against Ottoman raiders near Bucharest. The details of his death remain disputed, but what is certain is that his head was cut from his body and sent to Constantinople as proof of his death. But death could not contain what Vlad had become in life. The stories that had spread across Europe during his imprisonment now took on new life, growing and mutating with each telling. He had transcended mere mortality to become something archetypal, a figure that embodied humanity's deepest fears about power, unchecked by conscience. The legend of Vlad the Impaler thus serves as a dark mirror, reflecting humanity's capacity for both heroism and horror, reminding us that the line between protector and monster can be terrifyingly thin. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legend of Vlad the Impaler. If you enjoyed this historical exploration, please like and subscribe for more tales from the darker corners of history.